Welcome to She Said Homestead, the podcast that explores homesteading from a range of perspectives. We're Sage and Mickayla, two homesteaders, each with unique experiences, properties, and future goals for our homesteads. We're discussing various homesteading topics, sharing our personal experiences as women working full-time who are managing homesteads as well, and shining a light on the stories of other inspiring homesteaders.
Before we dive in, be sure to hit that subscribe button so you never miss an episode. And if you enjoy our podcast, please consider leaving a review. It really helps us grow and share these homesteading stories with even more people. Hey there guys, welcome back to the podcast. I'm Mickayla from Calico Cow Acres.
And I'm Sage from Terra Nova Acres, and we both have homesteads in Western North Carolina.
Today we have another guest on, and we're really excited about her. She gardens and has chickens and has a whole little sort of homesteading setup in upstate South Carolina. Okay, so since you're our guest, Kathleen, why don't you go ahead and start out and tell us what you were up to this past week?
I'm currently in the process of setting up my first rental unit. So I work in short-term rentals, and I work for a lady that has a couple, she's got like 23 short-term rentals, and I've been kind of following her and working for her for the last year in preparation for starting my own. And so we got that moving at the beginning of May. And so I'm like deep in painting, buying furniture, going there all day, every day to get Amazon packages. And yeah, so I've been doing that. As far as the garden goes, I've re-sowed a couple of things that didn't germinate and pop up. And that means my garden is hopefully fully planted for the summer, besides peppers. So yeah, it's kind of been a busy few weeks, and it's going to continue to be. So that's a good thing though.
That's awesome that you have your garden almost entirely planted. I know for Mickayla and myself, our safe to plant season has really just started, but since you're in South Carolina, when does that start for you?
I usually have like a hard and fast rule that I don't plant anything out until Mother's Day. That has really helped in the last few years that we've lived here. That rule has like proven itself. We always get a late frost, but it was like the middle of April and we did not have a predicted frost day. So I took the chance. I planted out like 2 or 3 of everything, like tomatoes, I started hardening off all my starts. And so I don't have as much space as you guys either, but that is not typical. So typically I'm first week of May.
Yeah, I think we all were kind of in the same situation with that this year. The month ahead last frost situation really threw me for a loop this year. I kind of panicked. I was like, oh my gosh, I could plant everything out, but I still have not planted nearly anything because I wasn't ready.
Yeah. I feel that. And every year I do that rule of like the Mother's Day or the second week of May. I see these people getting tomato harvests at the end of June, and I'm like, when did you plant your tomatoes, and how did you save them from whatever frost we had? So I might be like the tomato envy this year, which is exciting. I might have tomatoes really early instead of like going into August. So what have you been up to, Sage?
It's like a little bit of everything, which it's mid-May. That's par for the course. But I did a hive inspection, and it was a kind of crucial one because I hadn't been able to find any eggs since I installed the bee package a few weeks ago. And so this inspection was, if I don't find eggs, then I need to replace the queen that's in there. So I invited Chrissy over because she knows bees, and I was like, look, I just want to be sure because it can be hard to find the eggs. So she and I found eggs. We also found some queen cells, which means that the hive is trying to replace the queen. That's a whole thing. Anyway, did a hive inspection. I don't need to requeen. That's a win. I've been trying to plant stuff, but also I did get a cold snap. I got temperatures as low as like 39. So I was covering the peppers and the tomatoes that I already have out. And like we referenced last time, Mickayla and I both had a crazy storm. So the hail took out a bunch of my tomatoes, and then it just hasn't stopped raining. And so I've been digging drainage ditches through the second half of my garden. So I did that. really chaotic. I also impulse bought chicks because they were at the feed store, and my chick order, my other layers for this year are going to come in soon. And I told myself that if I found Morans this year, close to when I was getting my chicks anyway, elsewhere, because it was too late to add them to my order, that I would get them. And that's exactly what they had. So I grabbed 4 Moran chicks, and then I got an email yesterday that the rest of my layer order is going to be here, or that they just shipped it out. So it'll probably be here tomorrow morning, if not the morning after. I think that's most of it. I don't know. It's kind of been a blur.
I've noticed that since owning chickens, most people that say chickens say that I bought more chickens because the feed store had them is like enough of an excuse to buy chickens. They had them.
I mean, yeah.
Why not?
I almost did that again. We already got our spring chicks, and they had the 3 kinds that we wanted really badly a few weeks ago. And I was like, oh, do we need more? They had Americanas, they had Morans, and they had Easter eggers, and they were all the premium pullets that they had. And the last time we went, they had a couple of them, but they were like straight run, so we didn't get those kinds. But those are all the ones I wanted. And we have a broody hen right now. I'm like, we could just tuck them under her, like not have to worry about it. I'm still considering it, but Taylor's like, do we need them? And I'm like, well, yeah, because they're cute.
Yeah, but you already got chicks this year.
We only got 8.
Still.
Honestly, if we hadn't gotten a rooster in the batch we last got, I think I probably could have convinced him to get more. But we're already like stressed out about the roosters, so he's like, no.
Yeah, what's your rooster count at now? 3? Even though you got rid of one?
Yeah, we got rid of one. We had 3 before, and now we have another one, so we have 3 again. And he's a Brahma, so he's gonna be massive, the one we just got. And Eggo, our like main rooster, who's usually amazing, he spurred me this weekend, and I have a bruise on my leg like 2 inches wide, and like a scratch, and like where his claw, what are they called, spur, hit me. So yeah, my leg is like black and blue right there. It's insane. It didn't even hurt that bad. It hurts now. So
Jeez.
Me and roosters. Not a fan at the moment.
What about you, Mickayla? What have you been up to this week other than getting spurred by roosters and almost buying chicks?
I've been trying to get the garden ready. Trying is the key word. I feel like it's been raining nonstop, and so we finally got a couple of not rainy days. Friday was like the first not rainy day, and I was like, okay, I'm gonna get the 4 or 5 garden beds that I have tarped still, tilled up with some compost, because those are ones that I didn't cover till later in the season, so they needed to be tilled still. They haven't been covered most of the year. And oh my gosh, I like can barely move because I hurt my back trying to till the solid muddy clay, and I literally cannot get it off of the tiller. It's caked on there and dried so hard. Like that's how muddy it was. So I've been hauling more compost and topsoil to try and remedy that, to dry it out. So I haven't been able to plant anything yet. So I've just been like getting those ready. Saturday, we left the homestead and did things, which is really weird. We don't usually leave. We went to the nursery, got some plants, obviously. I got tomatillos that, like, the fruit on the plants is already bigger than any tomatillos I grew last year, which is wild. So I need to get those planted. And then we went to Habitat and wandered around, got some picture frames, and so I can actually like start decorating in our unfinished house a little. We went to Red and Stevens that night to visit, and there was like a car drifting Formula Drift event or something that we all watched and just like hung out. We met some other friends there. Or we got to see Papaya again, which was really cool. Taylor held him. He walked like right up to us and he was like, hello. So that made me really happy. We got to meet their ducks and geese and whatnot. So that's pretty much all I've been doing, is trying to get the garden ready. And yeah, we left the homestead and like did something for a night, which that hasn't happened in a very long time.
That's always hard during like the main spring push, though. I
It
don't
is.
know. I always have to tell my friends, like, hey, if you don't hear from me for the month of May, that's normal. I am busy. I don't have my phone on me. I am getting stuff in the ground because if I don't just ignore everyone, it's not going to get done.
So it worked out okay since my back was like not doing like I was not doing well. I was not doing like I was not going to be able to do physical labor in the garden on Saturday anyway, probably. So we didn't go over there until Saturday night. And we just like kind of putted around town and like did things Saturday, but it worked out well. However, I am quite stressed about the fact that my next 4 weekends are also busy with things not here. Okay, that is enough about me. Let's get into the actual episode. Why don't you tell us a little bit about who you are and what you do?
My name's Kathleen. I am an Airbnb or short-term rental co-host in upstate South Carolina. And I have a small backyard garden and a few chickens. I am like the queen of hobbies. So I'm really doing everything all the time. And I know a little bit about a lot of things. Not a perfectionist in any of them. But yeah, I keep busy with all the random hobbies I have accumulated over the years.
Do you pick up hobbies and set them down, or do you pick them up and stick with them?
Ooh, that's a little bit of my problem is that I usually pick them up and stick with them. And so then I'm like juggling reading and crochet and sewing and home renovation and whatever else. And so I feel like I have no free time. When in reality, that is my free time. But there's definitely been some things that I've like decided weren't for me and just dropped. But I really, really have to keep my hands busy at all times. It's a little bit of both, I guess.
You do like pottery and stuff, right?
Yes. So actually my undergrad degree is in ceramics and I did that for a few years out of college. And then with my husband's job, we moved a lot and I was kind of bouncing around from like community studio to community studio. Finally got a wheel and a kiln in my laundry room / garage. So I'll have a sale like once a year, but it really is just to kind of get that creative outlet. Here's another person not using the degree they got. Either of them, really.
All right, before we get into the rest of these fun questions, we have a few rapid fire ones for you just to get to know you a little better. They're short and silly. So, are you an introvert or an extrovert?
I'm an introverted extrovert for sure. Like I love being around people and I love hanging out and having like really deep conversations, but I need a good like nap and a few days of not doing that afterwards.
What is your favorite color?
Probably purple.
How about what's the last thing you planted?
Lemon cucumbers.
What is your favorite meal to make from garden veggies that you grow?
Mm, Probably a shepherd's pie or a chicken pot pie. Something along that like really hearty like winter meal.
How about guilty pleasure? What's your current one?
Ooh, probably like Love is Blind.
Nice.
TV show. Yeah. I'm not a huge reality TV show watcher, but that one gets me.
I've been
Sometimes-
sucked in by that one before.
It gets me. It's fascinating to watch.
Sometimes you just need some trash TV. I watch
Yeah,
Dance Moms more than
true.
I'd like to admit.
Ooh.
Okay, what is your favorite season?
Definitely the spring. I always thought I was like a fall girly, but the spring I definitely feel like is my kind of new year. Like I don't really make any goals around January 1st or anything like that. I kind of save that for when my soul feels reawakened. Like the first warm breeze, I'm like, oh, I'm alive.
Okay, so we're gonna get into the big questions now.
Dun,
The
dun,
first
dun.
one, the first one is, where are you located?
Yeah, so I'm in upstate South Carolina, specifically Boiling Springs. It is just like a little suburb of Spartanburg. And I live in a really typical 1990s neighborhood. Um, and that's where I have my little pseudo homestead on a little less than 1 acre. And what is fenced is like probably a little over a half an acre.
I didn't realize you had a whole acre. I feel like from pictures, I only ever see like your little greenhouse and garden area. So that's really interesting. I didn't realize you had that much space.
Yes, that's actually like the main reason we bought this house. We weren't really like looking at anything specific, but when we saw this listing, I was like, 1 acre. My husband wasn't like so keen on going straight into hardcore homesteading life. So this is our compromise. But unfortunately, it came with an HOA. So we're working around that. But all of our lot is probably one of the smallest lots in the neighborhood, actually. So we have a lot of space and definitely don't feel like we're on top of one another.
And what animals do you raise on your little 1 acre plot?
I have 2 dogs and 4 chickens, and those are a really recent addition. So super exciting.
What accommodations do you have to make to have chickens with that HOA?
I definitely had to make like an under the table deal with them, honestly. I kind of like cornered my HOA president on a walk one day and just ran into him, and he said something along the lines like, if it's in your backyard and I can't see it, I don't care. And I was like, funny that you say that. I've been thinking about getting chickens for like 5 years now. How do you feel about that? And he kind of like hummed and hawed, and he was like, what the hell? Just go ahead and get you some chickens. So we definitely made it clear that I would have no more than 5 or 6 and no roosters. I'm going to say nobody else in the neighborhood besides him and my immediate neighbor knows that I have them. And we're going to keep it that way as long as possible.
I was super excited to ask you to be on here because I was like, yay, we can talk about your chickens.
I love
Do you have names for them? I think you do. I want to know what they are.
I do. Yeah, and I've like gotten a few people telling me that it's wrong, like I shouldn't have named them this, but I named them ways to cook eggs. And so to me it's like they're not named ways to cook chicken.
Yeah.
They're named ways to cook eggs, and eggs is why I got the chickens. So they're named Sunny for Sunny Side Up, Benny for Eggs Benedict, Frittata, and Quiche.
I love it. They're so cute.
I really went back and forth. They were going to be Game of Thrones characters' names, like all the strong women in Game of Thrones, but I thought maybe that wouldn't age well if like one of those actresses came out to be like bigoted or something. Like I can't. Also, I felt like I couldn't name a chicken a character who died. That was like giving them a bad omen.
That's fair.
So yeah.
It's a lot more thought than I've ever put into any of my chickens' names. But I mean, you make good points.
Listen, I've been thinking about getting chickens for 5 years. I've been leading up to this day, and I put a lot of thought into it.
The chickens that you got, you didn't get them as chicks, like tiny chicks. They looked like teenagers. So can you tell us like how you acquired them?
Yeah. So I did get pullets, and I basically scoured every upstate poultry group on Facebook. It was actually really a lot harder than I thought it would be to find pullets that I knew were hens that were integrated. We have apparently a pretty large like chicken wholesaler in my area, but I wanted 4 different breeds and they were all separated, and I didn't have a really good way to like make sure they integrated well. So I basically just waited for like the right Facebook post of somebody listing pullets that they had that were already integrated and were already in a coop, because I really didn't want to spend honestly the money that it was going to take for a brooder for 4 chickens. I was like, didn't want to make that initial investment. So yeah, it worked out quite well. She was located in Gray Court, which is like 40 minutes down the road, and I just went and picked them out.
The next question is one we kind of talked about a little bit before we started recording, so I'm really interested to hear your answer on this. Do you consider yourself a homesteader? Why or why not?
I want to say I do, because more than, in my opinion, more than like the amount of land you have or the amount of animals you raise, it's a mindset. Really, like anybody can be a homesteader. It's not something you have to earn, I guess, but I think there's definitely that like lore around it, especially on social media, and since it's like made a comeback, I guess. And so really my mindset is always to like steward my land and my animals the best I can, and my home the best I can, try to replace as much food as I can that's usually bought at the grocery store, and just have like a slower living attitude. So I want to say I am, and I use that daggone hashtag. It's just hard when like you see all these beautiful pieces of property and, you know, barns and cows and all of this, and it's like, I live in a neighborhood and we're really happy in this neighborhood. I don't see ourselves like expanding or moving anytime soon. So it's definitely like more of an internal battle than it is like, no one's been like, you're not a homesteader. No one has said that. It's totally just in my head. So I think I'm gonna like make today the day that I claim that.
And we fully support that and are so happy that you get to use this platform as a way to kind of draw that line in the sand. So, yay.
Yeah, thanks.
So, how long have you been gardening, and then how long have you been keeping the chickens?
I've been gardening on and off since I was a teenager. I remember my parents like cut down a tree in our yard, and I insisted that where that tree was be my garden, and I remember like exactly what I grew and what I got out of it. And then of course, you know, you go to college and you live in dorms and you live in apartments that don't really accommodate that. So I definitely transitioned to the indoor plant obsession. That's still going strong. And then pretty much as soon as I felt like I could manage or I had good enough light for some pots, I started just growing out of pots on our balconies or in our backyard. Fun fact, I mean, like, come a long way. My first tomato cage I ever bought, I put it on upside down. So really come a long way in the knowledge of gardening. But you got to start somewhere, and it held the tomato up. So then it wasn't really until we moved here. We've been really like not really lived anywhere longer than a year and a half for the first few years of our marriage. This is the longest we've ever lived somewhere pretty stable. And pretty much the minute we moved in here, I was like, so the garden's going to go here. And I'm going to need you to help me build that. Thank you. And we're going to need to rip out the bushes here. That's also going to be a garden. So on and off for a really long time. I've got farmers like in my ancestry. So I just say it's like in my blood to want to do that. And then I just got the chickens a few weeks ago. Like I said, that's been a 5-year journey. I was like, I'm going to get this HOA to say yes to these chickens.
Okay, that leads really well into the next question. Will you describe your little homestead setup for us?
So I've got probably like 140 square feet total of gardening space, not including pots. And I do raised bed gardening because I also have red, rock hard, solid clay. And so I built kind of first raised bed one year, another raised bed the next year. It's kind of just like nicely organically grown since then. And I have a little greenhouse that's new and pretty exciting. We got it last summer. And then kind of at the rear end of my fenced area, I've got the chickens in a run, like a 4x8 run that I got on Facebook Marketplace. It was like an awesome find. And then had somebody in Hendersonville build the coop. So that's our little setup.
I'm wondering if I'm remembering this correctly. Did you have to move your garden? I feel like there was like a septic issue or something. I vaguely remember that.
So I suffer from overthinking, and I got into my head that this house is like 26 years old. I got into my head because our house was in like the landscaping was not really kept up very well by previous owners, that the septic tank had never been pumped. And I like really obsessed over the fact that we needed to pump our septic tank because we weren't like having any symptoms of it being wrong. It just got it in my head. And we came out to have the people find it, and it was under my garden bed. And it took us about an hour to realize that. And so I had to like disassemble. It was an L-shaped bed, and I had to like disassemble one of those legs. And I basically moved it in front of my greenhouse into like two smaller tiered beds. But that was that was something else. I was like, "Oh, I did that." We didn't even like think about where it was when we first moved in. There were bushes there, so I was like, "No one, you're not supposed to put bushes on top of a septic tank because of like micro roots." But they did. So, yeah.
If I ever had to move my garden, I would cry.
I was more so like, how am I going to do this? Like, and I literally just took like a reciprocal saw and sawed it off and put boards where like I wanted to keep that other leg of the bed. Yeah. It's not as pretty as it used to be, but we got our septic tank pumped. Really glamorous. And there's not a garden bed on top of it anymore, so if there's ever an issue, we know where it is.
So, what made you want to get into these things? I mean, you said you talked a little bit about, gardening is in your blood and, you've wanted chickens for a while, but what's really that driver behind that for you?
That's a good question. I really just think it's innate. Like, I think it's just a feeling. I don't know. It never seemed like an option. Like, it never seemed like, oh, I think I'm going to grow a tomato. It was like, I'm obviously going to have a garden. Like, it never, I don't know, it never like wasn't a thought. I mean, I grew up going to families' farms and just being around agriculture. So yeah, it never was really like a will I, won't I, should I get into this? It was like, it's just what we do.
It seems like with that answer, you kind of answered the next one too, which is, do you see yourself homesteading in the long term? And if you do, what scale do you see that like eventually? Do you see it downsizing, growing, the same?
Yeah, I definitely got it in my head that like I would need 5 to 10 acres and need all of the things to like feel fulfilled in this like lifestyle, I guess. And I wondered if getting the chickens would kind of like scratch that itch a little bit of like, I want all of these things, but do I really like want or need or have time to like mow 5 acres of pasture and like do all of it? I was like, I don't think that truly fits in with our lifestyle. I think if I obviously like will continue, I would definitely love to not be in an HOA. I would love to like not worry about how tall my grass is and if it's edged and all of that. Mine is really chill. Like we really don't have like that many problems, but there's definitely just that underlying like pressure to keep the facade up, I guess. But if we were to move, I don't know if I would like really look for that much more land, but I feel like I couldn't downsize. I definitely feel like I don't know what I'd do with less than what we have now. All of my yard would be garden, and we love this yard because our dogs can run and play and like have a ton of space.
You mentioned at the beginning that your husband kind of wasn't sure about like diving into like full blast homesteading.
Yeah.
How is he involved in the homesteading with you?
Yeah, I mean he has built my beds, which is lovely, and he's like surprised me. I went away for one weekend and I had a new garden bed when I got home, and I cried. And he's so supportive, but he doesn't really have like the passion for it. He was really indifferent to us getting chickens. He was like, that's your thing. they're gonna smell. Like he had kind of all those like ideas of what owning chickens is like. And so he finds them funny and they're cute, but he's not like out there giving them treats. He also works really long hours. So there's only so much time he can commit to other things in life.
I feel like you mentioned you don't want to be in an HOA eventually. And I know like we've talked before briefly about the HOA and like trying to connect with people in your neighborhood and like not really feeling welcome, I
Yeah.
guess. Like, can you elaborate on
Yeah.
that?
Yeah. I definitely think like when you move somewhere, we moved here from Lexington, Kentucky. And even though Kentucky likes to claim that they're the South, they are not the Bible Belt South. And moving here into this area in this neighborhood, a lot of people have lived here since their house was built. Like, so we have a lot of older people in our neighborhood. We were like this young couple coming in. Since there's been some like younger couples with kids and things like that moving in, but it definitely was hard to find a community. I still feel that way. I really have built a community not revolving around the people I live near, and like I don't have any of my neighbors' numbers and they don't have a house key and I don't go ask for a cup of sugar. You know, that like 1990s Americana doesn't really exist the way I would want to. I mean, I would like to have those relationships. Our immediate neighbor, who is actually closer to the chicken coop than our house is closer to the chicken coop, we've gotten to know them a little bit more over the past year or so. And the husband in particular was really excited about the chickens. And
Aww.
he was like, I'll give you a little, secret call. And so anytime I'm back in the backyard, he'll go, hooty hoo. And I'll go, hooty hoo. We call to each other. He's so cute.
Oh, I love that.
So it's getting a little better. And he was really supportive of the chickens. And I've given him a few plants and things like that in the past. So HOA has its pluses and its, and its negatives. So just kind of trying to skirt the rules and ask forgiveness, just not permission on most things. If it's not front facing, I've given up on asking people what I can do.
It sounds like you're like getting in the groove of being there. Like,
Yeah.
even if it's been years.
Yeah, it really does take a while. It really does.
Do you think that now that you've gotten chickens, that might open the door to some of your neighbors getting chickens too?
I really hope so. The neighbor I was referring to earlier talked, and he said that he had considered it. They back up to the woods, so they could really do whatever they wanted to do. They own a furniture store. They have a huge box truck. They like park that thing around back. You would never know it's there. So I hope that I'm influencing and, I'll share eggs and all of that. Cause I would love for our neighborhood to kind of become a more lax community.
So when it comes to gardening, what is your general philosophy when it comes to things like, tilling and fertilizing? How do you just generally manage your garden? Is there anything that you steer away from? Is there anything you steer towards?
I'm definitely not like married to any one method. I am not like super well read on like, oh, the Charles Dowding, this, that, and the other. I think that's awesome. And like, if people have that knowledge, that's great. I'm more like controlled chaos. I try things out, and if it works, I do that again the next year. I always get to a point in the season where I'm like, oh yeah, I should have definitely fertilized this before I put it in, or I should be doing that regularly or whatever. And I don't really like take it too seriously, I guess. I did the lasagna method in my beds with like yard waste. I did cardboard yard waste, topsoil, compost, etc. over and over again. And I kind of just top that off. Part of getting the chickens was to make my own compost. So that's starting. So I don't have to buy that anymore, hopefully. But I usually top that off like once every other year. And as far as fertilizer, if I find some on sale, I'll do that. But if not,
This one's gonna be sort of a hypothetical since you just have the 4 chickens. In the future, if you were to get any more property, would you get any other animals? And like, if you were to, like, what's your philosophy around raising those as well?
I think it's one of those things where I like the idea of getting more animals, but I don't actually know if I really like it. I think it would be definitely fun to have more chickens and allow them to free range. You know, I was really when I picked out breeds, I was really concentrated on like what are some hardy breeds that can withstand the heat and won't actually. I was like, I don't need an egg every day. I don't need four eggs every day. If I could get some layers that are like an egg every other day, that's more than enough. So I would love to like dabble in some cooler breeds and like not really worry about the logistics of what I'm going to do with all those eggs or what kind of space I have. Yeah, so I don't know if I would add any animals. I love the idea of like some little pygmy goats or something, but again, I have really temperamental dogs. They're wonderful and like they've taken to the chickens pretty well, but they're like my babies and my priority, and I don't want to mess up their life too much. And I think adding a goat to the backyard or to whatever land we had would like really flip a switch in what we were able to do. And even when we got the chickens, I was like, we've made our life like very purposefully calm and routine. And even throwing chickens into that changes that, nice, calm routine that we've had going. And I'm like, I just have to set a new routine. So don't think I would, I guess. Maybe some more chickens, some fancy breeds.
You can just come visit my goats when I get them.
Yeah. I also like get my fill. Like that's the other thing too is through friends and family members, like I'm visiting farms with those things pretty, regularly a couple times a year. And so I guess I feel the need to like have it in my own backyard.
So, what would be your favorite thing to grow? I guess chickens included.
My favorite thing to grow is garlic and a little bit like sentimental, but also it's the first thing I felt like I grew in like serious bulk where I had enough to get me through the year. And so it gives me like some satisfaction, I guess, that like that was the first thing I was like, I can produce enough food in a year to feed like our need. Yeah, and I have matching garlic tattoos with my best friend. So we say that garlic is the start of every good dish, and it's like the foundation of a good friendship. So yeah, I love growing some garlic.
I'm not gonna disagree on any of that.
No. How much garlic do you grow, like space-wise? Like how much do you usually plant?
I would say I plant like 6 rows in like a 8-foot long bed, and they're probably like 3 inches apart. I think I order like a pound or a pound and a half from wherever has it, and because I'm usually ordering it late and everywhere's sold out. So
Yep. Feel that.
Yep.
What is your favorite thing about this lifestyle?
I think it's the reflectiveness that it brings out in me, if that makes any sense. And I'll try to explain. And this might sound like woo-woo or whatever, but I really don't, like, there's no place I feel like more connected to who I am or like the earth more than in the garden. And it just kind of quiets my brain and helps my mental health and, provides sustenance. And I think about that a lot. Like I just really live in like a space of gratitude with the garden and now the chickens and like just being the best like steward of my home and my property that I can. And so yeah, I just like reflect on how lucky I am to even be able to do it, to have the land, to have the space and the resources. So yeah, it just kind of encourages the like, we're all good. It's all going to be okay feeling.
So then on the flip side of that, what has been your biggest challenge so far?
I have a few. So one, I'm really fearful of snakes. And on like That sounds ridiculous. I have not ever seen a snake in my garden. I'm a little bit nervous about the chicken eggs, really honestly nervous about it. But even like going outside sometimes sets that fear up. And it is something like I have to work through every time I step outside. Like I step outside and I think it is going to be okay. If there's a snake out here, you're not going to die. Like it's all going to be all right. I have to like go through that mental gymnastics every time I go outside. It's like a deep rooted fear. Aside from that, I would say the lack of space. Like I would love to be able to grow a lot more variety of things. But over the years, as I've tried that and things have failed, I get really mad that I used the space to grow something that failed. Like loofah or Kajari melons or anything that's like, I know loofah's hardy. I didn't give it enough space. Absolute fail. Things that are a little more finicky or like these beautiful heirloom seeds, I get nervous to take up space in my garden to grow something I'm not sure if is going to produce. Where I know that like if I put a Dr. Witchy's or a Roman heart tomato, I'm going to get a really big yield from that and like stock my freezer. So I would love to like have more growing space to experiment, I guess, and not feel like every square inch is like precious soil that I need to make something produce.
So do you tend to grow like hybrid seeds or something like not just heirlooms so that you're able to make sure you get what you need out of that space?
Yeah, like I mentioned earlier, if like one thing works for me one year, I'm gonna do that again the next year. So I've got like some fun heirlooms that I grow, but like I've had the most luck with like a pack of seeds from Home Depot of pickling cucumbers, and so those are my go-to. And I'm growing like really common, green beans and really common onions and things like that. So I don't necessarily stick to one thing or the other, just kind of throw caution to the wind and see what sticks.
With that in mind, like potentially wanting more growing space to experiment and whatnot, what does your perfect setup look like?
So right now I have like almost a U shape where I've got beds here and beds here, and I've got another row of beds here, and then it's like encased in like pebbles, like rock ground cover, I guess. Can't think of the word. I would love to take this side of the U and just keep like stacking beds back to my fence, really. But that takes a lot of money and resources because I feel like I have to do above ground gardening just with the lack of soil nutrients. And I've tried to grow in the ground here, even with amending the soil, and it does not do well. Yeah, I'd love to just kind of push that rows and rows back. I would love to like have a little corner of like corn or something. I get morning sun in my backyard, so that also like works in my favor. But I've noticed I've tried to like plant along the fence line, and that obviously is shaded all the time. It doesn't work well. But it has let me extend the life of some like winter crops a little longer. So like lettuces and I have a really hard time with brassicas. One, because my Cocker Spaniel mix likes to eat my broccoli. Every year I plant broccoli and it gets about this tall and he jumps in my garden bed and eats it. Just like optimizing the sun and kind of the space would be a little bit better just to kind of expand that U out.
Would that eat into like where your dogs play then? Is that why you obviously like other than cost of doing it?
Yeah.
Is that why you haven't?
It would. I mean, I feel like even if I took those like 6 to 8 foot long beds and extended it back, they still have a really good, space to frolic. So I'm not so concerned about that.
All right. Well, you're gonna have to make your husband listen to this and be like,
he knows. He knows. I'll be like, we haven't added anything to the garden in a while, but I just added chicken, so I cannot use that for a long time.
Technically not the garden.
He might not see it that way.
That's the yard, not the garden.
So with your backyard setup, how much food do you harvest in a gardening season? And then also how much of that do you preserve to eat, through the winter, through the off season?
I've come in the last few years to kind of do things a little more like biannually. In this case, in meaning every other year instead of twice a year. Last year, I grew a lot of shishito peppers, and I still have like 5 gallons of shishito peppers in my freezer. So I will not be planting any shishito peppers this year. As much as I love them, I got a little sick of them. But aside from that, I'm pretty set for a year in things like tomatoes or tomato sauces, tomato products, I guess, garlic. I would love to up my onion game. This year it's shallots, and I think I'll have enough shallots to last lifetime, so I like won't do those again next year. Green beans, bell peppers, black-eyed peas are all pretty set for a while, so I'm able to sustain like my husband and I cooking regularly. I cook, how many meals in a week? 21 meals in a week, probably cook 19 of them. I feel like for the amount of space I have, I'm really happy with that yield. Most preserving I do is freezing, just because I don't have a pressure canner. So if I'm canning something, it's something like pickles. And then I've just kind of learned that freezing is like the best bet for me to get that product out of the garden and like actually onto a plate instead of worrying about when am I going to can these things. I feel like you all know that becomes its own like part-time job, is preserving what you bring in.
Yes.
So I'll do like with tomatoes, I'll score them really quick, put them in a gallon freezer bag, and then like cook them in big batches in the crock pot and then refreeze that. So freezer jams, things like that. I've got a ton of strawberries. I bring in enough strawberries until I'm red in the face about them. I'd love to like up our fruit production. I've got some blueberry bushes and blackberries, but we don't really get a whole lot. And I've got some apple trees that have fire blight, so I'm pretty upset about that. Yeah. I was like, oh, so there's nothing I can do about this. Great. Pretty set on all the staples that, we eat. There's a lot of things that are very popular to grow in the South that I do not grow because we do not like to eat them, like okra. It's just not something I'm interested in eating ever.
Have you had to buy an extra freezer to support all of that preservation, or is it something that you somehow magically fit in your normal kitchen freezer?
No, we have a deep freeze. Yeah. It's not huge, but it does the job. We also buy like from a salvage grocery store, like you do, Mickayla. So a lot of things in that freezer are that as well. Meats and other assorted goods from the good old salvage grocery store.
Okay, so something we haven't really talked about at all up until now in the podcast episode is cooking. Is cooking a
Yeah.
big part of this for you too? Like, do you really like cooking? Is that part of the reason you do homesteading things?
Yeah, absolutely. I have an associate degree in culinary arts. I can't explain it. It's what I did right out of high school, and then I got into the industry and realized that people are mean, and it's a really hard industry to be in. But it stemmed from just a love of cooking, and my family is Cajun, and so that's just always been like growing up as a kid. It was like maybe you went out to eat on your birthday. We were definitely an ingredients household, not a snacks household. And so yeah, it just, again, kind of like gardening, it feels like that's innate. It's like, what's for dinner? I don't know, I'm gonna cook it, either whatever it is. And I kind of love the challenge of like, what do I have and what can I make out of it? And just from like a nutrition standpoint, like knowing that, I'm making like good nutritious meals that are just like good for the body and the soul.
Some of my favorite things to watch, like on TikTok, if I ever go on TikTok or whatever, are when people are harvesting things from the garden and then they immediately take it inside and like make a meal out of it. That's the coolest thing to me. I don't do that often, honestly. I have goals to do that more. That's really cool to me.
Yeah. And that is a little like envy people who pressure can and like canned meat and things like that, because it is very much instant. I'm constantly having to be like, what do I need to take out of the freezer? What do I need to like immediately put in the air fryer or the pressure cooker or whatever from frozen? And that doesn't bother me. It's just something that I have to like account for. And there are days where I'm like, didn't take anything out of the freezer. Let's just wing it. Yeah. I do love a good cooking video too.
I think I know the answer to this one. Have you ever
Okay.
thought about quitting homesteading, gardening things?
I mean, there's definitely like when I'm setting up my grow lights and the shelf and getting all the things, I'm like, I definitely have this thought of like, is this even worth it? Like I spend all this time and money and energy and like they're selling zucchini for like 24 cents down at the grocery store, you know? And I definitely like have those thoughts, but immediately I'm like, nah, I'm good. I'm going to do it. You know, it is worth it to me. You know, it's definitely an initial investment and time you're not like necessarily reaping immediate reward for, but there's things in life that are just like that and they're kind of good for us, I think.
So, all of these things, like you just said, take time. They are a time commitment. How do you balance that with work, with your other life commitments, with everything else that you have going on?
Before hopping into property management, I worked from home since 2020, like everybody else. And I would definitely just like steal moments. I worked in higher education. So in between student meetings, classes, whatever, I would just like go down and steal little moments in the garden. I try to do the 20-20-20 rule, like every 20 minutes, you need to look at something 20 feet away for 20 seconds or something like that. So I would definitely like regimentally get up from my screen and go outside. Now that my schedule is a lot more chaotic and fly by the seat of your pants, immediately in the morning, I'm going outside. I'm like waking up, making a cup of tea, going outside, spending some time, like pick a weed here or there, you know, harvest some strawberries here or there. And then I have like really sensitive to the sun. So usually like in mornings or evenings is when I have the time and when I prefer to be out anyways. I've never really felt like, because I'm on a small scale, I'm sure that you all feel differently. I've never really felt like I haven't been able to get something done in the garden or like my job or other commitments are taking away from time in the garden. It's more just like a respite space for me. And I'm definitely like fast and loose with when should this be picked and what are the ideal things and like, oh, the bird got that one, it's fine. You know, I'm down to share with whatever gets to my fruit first.
So, what differences or unique challenges have you encountered homesteading on a small scale?
If I have like a pest issue, I mean, it can really like just take out my entire harvest. I mean, I've battled caterpillars and hornworms and whatever from tomatoes for years. I move where I put them every year. I do all the tricks. But yeah, it can be like, for lack of a better word, not to be dramatic, like devastating. Because I plant 9 tomatoes, and if I'm having a caterpillar issue on each of those tomatoes in my whole row, like, I don't know, it's just, I don't have a whole lot of like margin of error, I guess. And like I mentioned earlier, just the like lack of like being able to have a variety. And I definitely want to like share more than I do now. So I definitely share starts, but I'll have people reach out and be like, hey, can I have a jar of pickles? Or like, you know, not even ask, just be like, I really love pickles. And as much as I want to share with them, they're like precious to me. Because I don't have that many of them, you know? So yeah, just kind of like the limited amount of freedom I have with like sharing and or facing some sort of issue that takes out my plants.
I don't think that the whole precious thing like goes away.
Oh.
if you have more space, because we talk about all the time how we're like, I just want to look at all my jars because they're pretty and they're too pretty
Yeah.
to eat. Like
I've
I
heard
will willingly share, but I don't want to eat them. I'm like,
same.
they're too pretty.
Same. I've heard Sage talk about that too, of like, when do I actually use the food I preserve? And like, every time I empty a gallon bag or a jar, I'm like, what if I don't get this ever again, or this recipe, or what, it's like, it is such a weird oxymoron of like growing a lot of your own food and then having like decision paralysis when to actually use it. Yeah, I wish I could get over that, but it's there.
You're not alone in it.
No.
If you could give one piece of advice to someone looking to do what you do, what would it be?
I feel like the advice often given is just like make do with what you have. Like if you have a balcony, grow, a pot here and there, or like do what you can. And while I think that's so true, like just dive in and do something. Really, I would just like encourage that person who's wanting to do this to reach out and talk to people who do it and bring it up randomly. Like I have met so many people who I didn't know had a really large garden or had, like kind of lived this lifestyle or were a homesteader, because it's just not something people talk about a whole lot, especially if you're in like an office setting or, just not in this space. It's almost like this little secret society. So it's just, my advice is like just to talk about it and bring it up and say, have you ever grown a tomato, or, what should I be planting right now, or whatever it is. Just chat and like look for that community.
You're very, very correct with that, but it's really funny to hear also because that's all Sage and I talk about.
Yeah. But like so many people, I mean, people I talk to are like, wow, your garden is so great, and how do you do it? And I'm just like, I don't, do you want to come over? I don't have an answer. Like, how do I do it? I just do it. And I'm happy to like share that advice. But unless I know what you're looking to do or like what actually interests you about it, where do I start? Like, I could talk about the garden for days, but if you're just like, how do you do it? I don't know. We gotta like start somewhere. You know what I mean? We have to have like an initial flame.
Yeah.
Yeah, I feel like I'm a bit of a walking meme. Those posts that you see that are either, how to talk to someone who doesn't garden, and you're like, so weather's cool, or the one that I saw recently, oh God, what was it? I'm gonna forget it now that I'm talking about it. But where
Is it the one you sent me?
someone starts a conversation, so you like gardening, and the response is, you're not ready for this
Prepare.
conversation.
Yeah. You
Yeah.
sent me
Like,
that one.
that's me.
Yeah, honestly. And I don't know if y'all have this, but when somebody asks me about a hobby, it almost feels like boastful to be like, yes, I crochet and I read a lot and I do ceramics and I have a garden. Like, that feels so cringy to me to be like, yeah, I do all these things. You want to talk about it? Can we talk? Do you like these things? Do you want to be friends? Like, that's how my brain goes. But the words don't come. I like want to be like, yes, I'm passionate about all of these things. Can we actually have like a safe, non-judgmental space to like talk about this and you not think I'm a freak afterwards? It's hard to like get that going, honestly.
That's why I can only truly be friends with, I can be civil with anyone, right? But I can only truly be friends where one of the love languages is like exchanging info dumping. And like maybe
Yes.
it's a common interest. That's great. But like, I'm going to talk your ear off about gardening, and you can talk my ear off about whatever it is that you do. And that's
Yeah.
great. But not
Yeah.
everyone is capable of that. For some people, that is very off-putting. And
Yeah.
I am off-put by people being off-put by that. So
Yeah, I feel that. I mean, like the other week when I went to coffee with Red, she's getting into pottery. And we sat there and talked about pottery for 3 hours. And it was like a blink of an eye. And I was just like so grateful. I was like, I haven't been able to talk about this with anybody who knows what goes into it since I was in college. I mean, for 10 years, I haven't been able to chat about this. And it was just like really cathartic to like have somebody who is equally as interested and passionate and like willing to listen. And it's hard to find. It's hard to find.
Side note with that, I'm very excited about that because I've seen some pictures and it looks beautiful.
Her work is beautiful and like so thoughtful. And yeah, I was blown away.
Whenever somebody asks me about gardening and like how to start a garden, I feel like I send them a paragraph and then I never hear from them again because I overwhelm them.
Yeah. And like, I want, like, if I talk to you about your garden, I want you to send me pictures and like show me what you've grown and like, I don't know, the best, like, I don't know what I'm saying. Like the best switch of information, like it works. It only works when both people are willing to like put forth information to the conversation. If it's so one-sided, you're just like, okay, cool. How's that garden going?
That's why social media is so great because it's like I can put all of those thoughts out there, just post them on my story or whatever, and I don't really like expect anybody to respond. Sometimes they do, and I'm like, oh my gosh, why are people talking to me?
Yeah.
I'm just posting pictures of my garden.
I think too, it's an interesting like juxtaposition with like you all who have a little bit of branding behind your gardening. I mean, you have established names and you kind of have like a purpose behind posting or doing whatever it is you do. And I definitely haven't like touched that space of like, I'm going to make garden content or I'm going to be the person that like has this niche. And so with you all, I wonder if it's like, well, obviously they're going to talk about gardening. They're gardeners, they're homesteaders. Like that's what they do. Where I'm just like all over the place and my Instagram is just my name. And like, I don't know how that like organically happens, I guess. And I definitely haven't made that organically happen because I haven't put any effort into being like, I'm the suburban homesteader. I'm sure somebody already has that name, and like putting that out there.
Well, you're officially a suburban homesteader now as of this episode. And we've talked about that before. You and I have talked about that before with you not feeling like you can own that title and like on social media. I feel like you totally can. Like you're doing it. You have chickens now. You're official.
I know. Those dang little chickens changed everything.
Yeah, that's a good point. I think for me, I haven't fully owned the like, I am a YouTuber and I do have all this stuff. Like, the people that I work with don't know that I do all that on the side. And so to me, those still feel very separate. Like there are people who know me as that, and then there are people who definitely have absolutely no clue. And those things aren't very well married together, if at all.
Yeah, super interesting.
Okay, so this last one it's technically a question, but I'm going to answer it for you.
Okay.
It's a fun fact about you. And that is that Roots and Refuge follows you on Instagram. That is so cool.
I don't know how that happened. It was, honestly, it was like, not a like shoot your shot moment. It was what I did with you, Mickayla. I mean, I would like respond to their stories. And Jess had posted something about when they first moved into that property, they had like one small raised bed garden right outside of their house. And she posted something like, I don't know what we'll do with this in the future. I don't know if it'll stay here, if it's like really serving us or something like that. And I just commented on the story, DM'd her and was like, I am the raised bed backyard gardener that you're teaching. Like, please continue to do things like that because I cannot learn or relate from these like market garden rows. And all these things that I'm seeing from other YouTubers. And she just started following me. And I was like, what is happening? You kind of like told me that, I don't know. I was just blown away. Yeah. And we've had like a few, I think when she moved to South Carolina, I've like welcomed her and, through DM or whatever. And, yeah, just knowing that like she's an hour down the road. I have friends in Augusta and I drive through the area that their homestead is quite often. It's pretty cool. Pretty cool. I definitely, she's like YouTuber mecca of homesteading.
I feel like when they open their Homestead Exchange store, we should have like a little trip there and
Absolutely
hang out. That'd be fun.
Yeah, it would.
I just felt like I needed to share that about you because
yeah,
I think
it is
it's
cool.
really cool.
I think that's the first thing Sage said to me at the Christmas party. She was like, "You're the one that Roots and Refuge follows you." I was like, "Oh yeah, I am." That's me.
Yeah, we like exchanged our Instagram handles in that group chat to like, I don't know, kind of get to know each other before we were all in the same room. And I like went and checked it out and I was like, oh my God. Like,
who is this girl? Like we were saying at the beginning, who even are you?
Yeah, who even are you?
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know how that happened.
Okay, so in case anybody else wants to follow you on Instagram or anywhere else, where can we find you?
Yeah, so I really just have an Instagram. I don't have TikTok or YouTube or anything. And it's just my name. It's Kathleen _Crozier, Crozier. It's a toughie. Married into a tough last name.
Well, thank you, Kathleen, for being on the podcast and sharing all about your life and all about your garden and your chickens and how you ended up here.
Thank you. It's been an honor. I was like so fun. Honestly, I was like, me? So yeah, thank you.
Thanks for joining us on this episode of She Said Homestead. We hope you enjoyed our chat. Before we say goodbye, we'd love to hear from you. Send your homesteading stories to us at shesaidhomestead@gmail.com. We can't wait to share them on the air. To stay connected, follow us on Instagram for updates and sneak peeks at what's coming up next.
If you like video podcasts, make sure you subscribe to the She Said Homestead YouTube channel too. We can't thank you enough for being part of the She Said Homestead community. Until next time, happy homesteading.